Okay, so I want to try to do this real quick before my roommate comes back and before I got to go to church. But this is from the article that I posted last night on the website. And it says in Ephesians 6:12, we are told that we wrestle against supernatural creatures in a place called the heavenly places. What exactly does this mean? And where is this heavenly place? What is actually going on there between us and the enemy? This article is going to be the first of a series breaking down the demonic influence and the war that has been going on since before time in a simple way that can be easily understood by anybody, lest Satan take advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices, written in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. I think that this simplifies things. So, I mean, I'm expounding to make something more simple. I know that sounds kind of contradictory, but for me at least, it makes sense because I had to envision in my mind where this place would be. And of course, being that we're in a three-dimensional world, it's impossible to construct any kind of a model of anything that's outside of those three dimensions, or something that's invisible. But we can still think about it, and we can still read what the word tells us, and we can go to the original language here that Paul was using to write in, and it's going to make things a little bit more. I mean, it sounds weird to go to a language like Greek and have it make more sense than English, a language that we know or that you would know speaking firsthand. It's because ancient Greek had a way with words that we don't have with our common English language, and the way that it's translated in the Bible into English is more for readability. The way that it's written in Greek, if it was translated like literally into English, it wouldn't read well. And that in itself would probably make things more complicated for people. So the way that it's translated is done in such a manner to make it more readable, to make the words flow better. But in some instances, that doesn't really expound on certain topics when you narrow them down, especially like one word. Anyways, I'm kind of starting to derail. So it says in Ephesians 6:12 that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I asked somebody what they thought principalities, powers, and rulers of the darkness were, and this person said, "Oh, well, it's the government, isn't it?" So it's kind of an answer that it would seem like it could be some form of government, because it says here principalities, powers, rulers, so, but it also says here in the last sentence, in high places, in the King James Version, and in other translations, it says in the heavenly places. So obviously it's not the government, and it's not any kind of human power, because no human power lives in the heavenly places, in the sky, the atmosphere. So we're going to get to what that word means. That's what the whole point of this particular study is to get to the root of this word, or this term, heavenly places. What does it actually mean? The key word here in Greek, you can find it if you have a Strong's Concordance. It's going to be G2032, and it's eperanios. And eperanios is the first part of the word, which is called the preposition is epi, okay? And it means over, above, upon, over, above, or upon, okay? And the next part of the word is the noun itself, oranos, which means being in heaven, belonging to heaven, heavenly, from heaven. And it's through the idea of elevation, it means, by extension, the sky, okay? So obviously the sky, if you look this word up in the dictionary, it's going to tell you that the sky is the region of the atmosphere, outer space as seen from the earth. And then atmosphere, that's the word that's used in the definition of sky. So you want to look that up, and then atmosphere is going to be defined as envelope of gases surrounding the earth, and is essentially the air itself. So there it is again. The word air ends up in the last, when you break it down, it's the air, okay? So the thing that had come to me was for some reason thinking about these words, and I remembered the word epidermis, and I'm like, okay, this word epidermis, I know it has the same the same beginning part, the same preposition as the epirannios word. And I thought to myself, okay, what does epidermis mean? Epidermis means it's the skin. I knew that much at least. So I looked that up, and it's going to tell you here that the epidermis is the outer layer of the three layers that make up the skin. So the epidermis layer provides a barrier to infection from environmental pathogens and regulates the amount of water released from the body into the atmosphere through transepidermal water loss. That's what the epidermis is. But the key point here is that it's got that same preposition, epi, which means over, above, or upon, as the word in study, epirannios. So it was easier to understand that the skin, being that it's part of the body, it's over, above, and upon the bones and everything else, is like an outer extra layer, right? So in the same way, this epirannios, when you break down the word, it's really saying here that it's an outer or extra layer above the air. So it's obviously an invisible spiritual dimension over and upon the air itself. The air itself that we breathe, the atmosphere, that's invisible. Even that's invisible to us. That's still made up of matter, and it's still part of the three-dimensional world that we live in. Even though we can't see it, it's still constructed of things that have weight and mass and whatnot. So even that is invisible, right? So then you got to think about this other layer, this epirannios that Paul is writing about here is even finer than that in a sense. And so it's even more unseen than that and more invisible than that. Over, lighter than the air, really, is what this place is, right? So being that that's what that means, right? I took it a step further and explained here what the word spirit means in Greek. The word spirit in Greek is pneuma, and it's Strong's number G4151 if you want to look it up, and it's considered a neuter noun, okay? So in this context, you can look it up for yourself and see that it means, there's a very long list of context that this word can be used in. But in this context that we're using it, the most appropriate one would be a spirit, that is to say, a simple essence, devoid of all, or at least all grosser matter, possessed of the power of knowing, desiring, deciding, and acting. A movement of air, a gentle blast of the wind, hence the wind itself, breath of nostrils or mouth. First part of this definition here, when it says the spirit being a simple essence devoid of all, or at least all grosser matter, right there it's saying that it's not construct. It's even lighter than the air, because like I said, even the air is matter. So this is something that doesn't possess physical matter as we know it. However, it does possess the power of knowing, desiring, deciding, and acting. And the last part of the definition is a movement of air, a gentle blast of the wind, hence the wind itself, breath of nostrils or mouth. In Psalm 33:6, it says that angels were created by the breath of God. They're literally breaths of God. That's what it says there. So it makes sense that these spirits would occupy a dimension over the atmosphere that they do, being what they are. It says in Psalm 33:6, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. Host is the angels. The breath of his mouth is exactly that. So basically, all the angels are created by his breath, and they're, breaths of God is what they are. And they occupy space in the atmosphere over and above the air itself. That's what that word in Greek means. So now we go back to the original verse here that we started with, Ephesians 6:12. It says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. In high places, we just got done expounding on that. what that is, okay? And we just got done doing a very basic, look into where the angels came from. Psalm 33:6, it tells you, and then it also says um, that, if you look in Greek, the word spirit means air, okay? So next part about this, we're going to expound a little bit more on this, right? It says same verse, Ephesians 6:12 is where we're at, okay? So the first part says we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I saw one Bible dictionary or something mention the fact that back in the old times, a couple thousand years ago when Paul had written this, wrestling was a sport where it was done to the death. It wasn't exactly like how it is nowadays. It was like it was done to the death in some cases or whatever. Like, I don't know if that's true or not. And it doesn't really matter because that's actually not what this is saying here. Because this word in Greek, wrestle, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I will do. I'll put the notes attached to this video, and you guys can look it up for yourself and see. This word wrestle, I believe it's pale. That's what it is. It's pale, and it has its root in another word that's called balo, and balo means to force, to vibrate, or to forcibly throw. Okay, so what this is saying here is that this wrestle here is this is kind of a watered down word. What it's really saying is we're being vibrated. Okay, it's up in here in the mind, and violently thrown out. Okay, that's the demonic influence in the heavenly places, in our minds, because we are in the heavenly places as well. It says that in Ephesians 2:6. So that's another thing. We're in the heavenly places. Jesus is in the heavenly places, and these things that we wrestle against are in the heavenly places as well. So this first part here says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. So it tells you right here that flesh and blood is not what these things that follow are. They're not flesh and blood, because flesh and blood, they're not flesh and blood. These are spiritual creatures, okay? And when you break down the next part here, okay, principalities, I believe the word is arche. It means chief, first in order, or commencement, the highest ranking, first. That's what that word means, okay? So the next one is powers. I believe the word is exousia. And exousia means delegated influence, okay? It means jurisdiction, law. The definition for this word is very interesting because it almost describes their function. This certain rank of things that we wrestle against. It almost describes like their powers, basically, because it says that they're a delegated influence. Okay, these are the ones that I believe get inside of people. These are the ones that do the most kind of footwork as far as influencing humans to do evil. Principalities are more like the thing that's mentioned in the book of Daniel, the Prince of Persia. These are things that preside over governments. The book of John tells you that we know that all the governments are under the control of the evil one. So whether or not that, Christ, everything belongs to Christ. Right now, all of the governments are under the control of the evil one. The book of First John will tell you that. And principalities, those are more the ones that are in charge of areas of land, geographical regions, and governments, government officials, those type of things. Powers, these are the ones that have a delegated influence, jurisdiction over people, over places, things, situations. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And rulers of the darkness is basically in Greek, it means next ranking ones, a cosmic power is what it means, and they're next on down the line. What exactly their exact function is, it's probably for another video. And the last one is spiritual wickedness in high places. So again, we go back to this word, in high places, in the heavenly places. So Paul's telling us here that we're vibrated and thrown about, not by flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness, a couple different ranks of evil angels here that it's described. All right. And the next thing I want to go to, just because we mentioned the word wrestling. If you go to Revelations 12, Revelations 12:3, it begins. It says, "And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth." Okay? I always kind of thought that when I read that this dragon is obviously Satan, but this dragon, when its tail drew a third of the stars to the earth, I always kind of thought that meant like it just randomly, he randomly swept a third of the angels down to the earth, and they had no part in it or whatever, like, because it kind of seems like that from the English writing. The tail, just took whatever it wanted and threw them down to the earth. When you go to the Greek, that's not what it says. It says in Greek that this word drew, where it says in verse 4, his tail drew a third of the stars. The word drew means to have marked or signified. Again, it's written in this way in English because it wouldn't really read in a kind of way that most people in English would want to be reading it, okay? So they're using different words here, but the word in Greek means to have marked or signified. It's a completely different understanding now, as opposed to something happening randomly. Something getting swept down from the sky is a completely different thing than something getting marked and signified. That's being chosen, okay? So Satan chose his angels that he knew or believed would be best suited for what he wanted to do against God. That's what that says. The other part about that is it says that in Revelation, I think it's Revelations 20:10, somewhere in there, it says the devil who deceived the whole world was thrown alive into the lake of fire, where the beast and the false prophet already are, and there they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. It says right there that he deceived the whole world. Okay, so he didn't deceive the angels. The angels were not deceived in the way that we understand that word to mean. They were chosen by him, and their place was no longer found in heaven, is what it says here in Revelations 12. But what I'm trying to get at is that he chose them. They chose him, and they fully committed with their eyes wide open to follow him and carry out their plans against God and his people. Human beings, on the other hand, we still had free will and we still made a choice to do evil. We didn't sin in the same kind of way. That's why there's redemption for us. That's why God so loved the world. He gave his only begotten Son, that whomsoever should believe in him will not perish but have everlasting life. It doesn't say God so loved the angels. It says God so loved the world. And that word world in Greek is cosmos, and it means all the humans on this earth, the planet itself, and the government set up in opposition to God is what that word means. It nowhere has anything to do with angels. So we have redemption. They don't. And that's pretty much it. One last thing is when it says that, okay, and through, okay, the word through here, yeah. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. The word through Okay, the word through here in Greek is katabalo. All right, and it has the same. The prefix is kata, which means to be forcibly thrown downwards in a downward motion. Okay, violently. That's what that means. Balo, that's the same uh, noun. I believe it's a noun from no, it's a verb. It's the same verb from Ephesians 6:12. Ephesians 6:12 says we wrestle. That word wrestle is pale, but it has its root in balo. And balo means to forcibly throw, like I said. So in Revelations 12:4, when it says Satan threw these angels to the earth after he marked and signified them, he threw them to the earth. Okay, that word is kata balo. Kata, forcibly thrown downwards. Balo, forcibly thrown down is what that word means. But my point is that essentially the same thing that Satan did to those angels by throwing them out of the heavenly places is the same thing that Paul is telling you that they're doing to us in Ephesians 6:12. The same thing that Satan did, marking and signifying those angels and throwing them to the earth out of the heavenly places, is the same thing that those angels are trying to do to us, throw us out of the heavenly places, throw us out of communion with the Father, and ultimately destroy us just like they destroyed everything else. So there's that. Hope that was kind of able to be understood. I got to get ready and go now. If anyone has any questions, let me know. Thank you. God bless you.